We are beginning lesson 26, the parable of the disloyal steward. The reading is taken from Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. He also said to his disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, what is that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. And the manager said to himself, what shall I do since my master is taking management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said, 100 measures of oil. He said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, how much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said, take your bill and write 80. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. What is the background of this parable?
Found only in Luke's Gospel. The parable of the disloyal steward is sometimes called the parable of the shrewd manager, or the parable of the unjust steward, or unrighteous, or dishonest steward. This parable, although spoken directly to Jesus' disciples, was also meant to be heard and appreciated by the Pharisees so that they would grasp its meaning. A rich man meets his steward and tells him he will be fired for mismanaging his resources. The steward had authority over the master's resources. He was permitted to conduct business on his behalf. Ordinarily, stewards were slaves, but this one was a free man, for he was neither being punished nor sold. He then proceeded to make deals with some of his master's debtors in order to secure a future for himself.
The parable of the unjust steward is probably the most difficult of the parables to understand. In the New Testament times, a wealthy man hired a manager or steward to oversee his estate. The steward was responsible to his master, but he had charge of his master's possessions and controlled large sums of money. This was a position of trust, but often presented opportunity for dishonesty. And regarding the amount of debts in real life is very large, although the exact figures vary. 100 measures of oil would be equivalent to about 800 or 900 gallons. The yield of possibly 150 olive trees and equivalent to the wages of about 3 years for the average worker. 100 measures of wheat would be almost 1,100 bushels, probably enough to feed 150 people for a year. The produce of 100 acres and equivalent to 7.5 years of labor for the average worker. In each case, the steward reduced the bill by the same amount, about 500 denarii, or the wages of more than 2 years for a day laborer. The parable tells of large business dealings. None of the people involved are poverty-stricken peasants or even people with average incomes. The reason it is important for us to see how big the amounts of the reductions were is so that we can see how much the steward was actually providing for his future. In a culture where reciprocity would have been expected, and where people whose bills were reduced by so much would have been very grateful. The steward had saved these debtors a total of somewhere between 4 or 5 years' wages they might have had to pay a day laborer. No wonder he felt confident that they would give him a place to stay when he got fired. Okay. Who is Jesus comparing to the steward and his cronies in this parable?
The steward is compared to a child of light or a believer, and the cronies or debtors are compared to children of the world or unbelievers.
So I have the steward represents servants of God, and the friends represent anyone who we would donate out of our time, talent, or wealth. And what has this steward done?
He squandered his master's possessions,
Right, he
which,
wasted. Oh,
which
sorry.
was his job to manage and oversee.
Okay, I have that he wasted his master's money or possessions. And what does the master require of him and why?
The master required him to make a report because he was going to be fired.
He had to hand in a complete account of his handling of the property because he was about to be dismissed as manager. And knowing this, what does the servant do?
The steward invited his employer's debtors to come and discuss their situation. He lessened their debt significantly, therefore securing their indebtedness to him and any favors he might require after getting fired.
The steward quickly had to devise a plan. He couldn't dig, nor could he beg for a living. So he contrived a way to make friends, so they would receive him into their homes when he lost his stewardship. He called his master's debtors one by one. To each one, he reduced the amount of debt, telling each to write a new contract. And what does the master commend in the steward?
He commends him for his quick thinking and resourcefulness in securing his future.
The Lord commended the steward for his shrewdness. He did not approve of the steward's dishonesty, but the Lord admired his wisdom in preparing for his future. And what does Jesus mean by the phrase in their generation? And the verse is verse 8. And the Lord commended the unjust steward because he had done wisely, for the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light.
People who are not followers of God are often more strategic and savvy in their dealing with others when it comes to worldly matters. The phrase in their generation refers to the time period and the culture in which they live.
Some have thought that this means in their manner of living or in managing their affairs. The word generation sometimes denotes the manner of life, as given in Genesis 6:9 and Genesis 37:2. Others suppose that it means toward or among the people of their own age. They are more prudent and wise than Christians in regard to the people of their own time. They turn their connection with them to good account and make it serve their worldly interests, while Christians fail much more to use the world in such a manner as to serve their spiritual interests. Why does Jesus command make friends of unrighteous mammon?
Jesus is saying that we should use our wealth, resources, and abilities to serve others and make a positive impact on their lives.
Jesus said, "And so I tell you, make friends for yourselves with worldly wealth, so that when it gives out, you will be welcomed in the eternal home." The steward had managed his affairs so as to find friends that would take care of him when he was put out of his office. So Jesus was saying to the tax collectors and those who had property to use their wealth to secure happiness and comfort in heaven. Jesus was not saying to do it in the same way that the steward did, for that was unjust, but rather that they should simply secure the result. This may be done in a positive way by using our riches in works of mercy, aiding the poor, contributing to furthering the gospel, and giving them in any way it will do good, so that God will approve of the deed and bless us for it. Of what do we have stewardship which belongs to another man?
All that we have belongs to God, and we are merely stewards or caretakers of the resources that God has entrusted to us. This includes time, talent, and material possessions.
You see, it says another man. That's what I wasn't sure about. So
Well,
the
I was thinking the other man is, Jesus.
oh, okay. So I was thinking in terms of actual men, the time that we spend during our working hours would belong to our employer, and then we would be responsible for stewarding that time well, managing that time well.
Right.
And then ultimately, everything we have belongs to God. And then I have a reference, Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 to 24. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Okay, and what are the true riches which Jesus mentions in this context? The context being verse 11. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches?
The true riches are the spiritual blessings and rewards that come from being faithful and obedient to God.
These are the riches of grace, the blessings and promises of the covenant of grace, the Spirit of God that enriches us, the riches of glory, the kingdom of heaven, and the inheritance that God will give us that will never fade away. And what is the principal lesson which Jesus is teaching in this parable?
The principle that Jesus was trying to convey for his listeners then and his followers today deals with how we are to be wise, shrewd stewards, not unjust ones. The unjust steward saw his master's resources as an opportunity from which to gain. Conversely, Jesus wants those of us who follow him to be just and righteous stewards of all that he makes available to us, giving such resources to those in need according to his will.
I have the parable teaches that the sons of light, or the spiritually minded, must use their worldly possessions to secure spiritual treasures. The world and all in it belongs to God, and we are the stewards of God's possessions. Therefore, we must use wisely what God has entrusted into our care in order that we will be received into the heavenly kingdom and be entrusted with the true riches. You have any questions or comments based on this lesson? No?
Just that he was not like the character in the story. He was not the ideal to meet, but he did have some qualities that we could learn from. But he is not what we should.
Yeah, I thought it was like he was
Yeah.
it
That's
was
the only thing. Like it was kind of like he's not the ideal person,
no,
right? No, he's definitely not. But he was able to fend for himself.
Yeah, I thought the part where he said that he can't dig and he's not gonna beg. That was just funny. It was self-aware, like, no, I'm not doing physical, I'm not doing manual labor, I'm not begging. Well, what can I do? It was funny. It's like it could have make like a nice series, like like Breaking Bad, when you're committing crimes, but you're doing it in a funny way. That could have been a nice series. Breaking olive oil.
I don't know about that.
Okay. You never watched Breaking Bad?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay.
It was good.
Anyway, you want you wanna choose a psalm?
Okay.
Ready.
I'll read Psalm 133 from the King James Version. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down upon the bed, even Aaron's beard, that went down to the skirts of his garments, as the dew of Hermon, and as the dew that descended upon the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, even life forevermore. Amen.
Amen.